do a roll call. Do you just want to announce the members and they can say here? That's, I guess, how we've been doing it.
Sure. Jerry Kelly.
Here.
Kyle Eichhorn.
Here.
And then Sammy Thatcher is not present.
Okay, so we have a quorum with 2 or 3. I don't have the agenda in front of me. Do you have that? Is it on Drive?
It's on Drive, and I can get it pulled up too. And then I'll share my screen with you guys.
Apparently it's raining too. Just
It is
started.
pouring. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so we do have minutes to approve.
All right, if you want to review the minutes on Drive, and then after that, I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes.
And Jerry, if I'm scrolling too fast, tell me to slow down if you're looking at my screen and not on your Google Drive.
I took a speed reading class, so I'm good.
Perfect. Glad we have you on this board with the speed reading. Gosh, February seems like a long time ago. I think so.
Oh my gosh.
That's just a blank page.
All right, well, I'll make a motion that we approve minutes.
All right, I have a motion. I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes approved. On to
Okay.
the next item.
First item we have is the stormwater user rate update. And I did find, I think it was back in April, we have a draft from Umball when they were still at Umball. They're Baker Tilly now. This was a draft of these, what is it, the user rate study that they had put together. So I know you guys don't need to flip through this right now, but at least we have it. It was from 2018.
18.
So, you know, if we do anything with this, you know, if we work with Baker Tilly, they can update this for us and then we can move forward with it. But at least we have a start of what we can look at. I mean, obviously, like, this is brand new for me too, for me at least. I'm not sure if you guys have seen these before. Jerry and Kyle, I'm sure you guys, I would hope, I guess.
We looked at this briefly in the February meeting, I think.
Did we? See, I looked back in the February. Are you on Utility Rate Advisory Board too?
Yeah, maybe that's where it came from.
Yeah, because I think there was one for Utility Rate Advisory Board, and it might have been water and something else that we looked at.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember looking at some studies.
Yeah.
Talking about it with Jenny, but.
Yes. Well, this is specifically the stormwater utility one that we have.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, I think we need to get this updated. So I guess I'm proposing that, you know, as staff, that I'll go back to Baker Tilly and see, we were working with John Seaver on it. So I'll touch base with him and see if he can, I don't know if you guys want to, do you guys want to start working on a new updated version of this? Or do you want time to review this and then we make some decisions at the next meeting?
I mean, I guess we could take between now and a month from now, we can review it and then maybe I guess we'd have to have town council approval to spend the funds to get this updated, or?
Right. Yeah, I think,
What do you think, Jerry? You want to give it a
Yeah,
month?
that was my concern, is it's gonna cost money to get this worked on.
It's not terribly old, I guess. So, um, yeah, I think give us a month to look at it,
okay.
and then we can discuss it next meeting and make a decision.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about in regards to that?
I don't have anything.
Yeah, no.
Okay. On the mapping that we're working on with Banning, I was not at the last meeting, so I might have to catch up with what you guys have seen or not seen, but this is basically what Banning has mapped out for us already. You can see, you know, the different symbols represent inlets or what we are working on now. We met with Banning last week or the week before, and we do have a contract with them to look at where the lines are, but we're going to try to do some of it in-house so we can spend our funds more wisely, I guess, because I think there's going to be some things that we'll want them to do that if we can do some of this work in-house, it will be better for us overall. So Cookie and Ricky, Jim Cook and Rick are going to be working with the street department guys to go out and start mapping where the pipes are between these points that have been collected already. So some areas Banning has already done. So like this area over by East Street and, you know, where the park is, where we're doing active work there right now, they've already located where those lines are underground. So that area is good, but we have a couple areas that we're trying to focus on first, which is over by Lisa Floyd's house, where she's getting a lot of flooding down on Main Street. And we think it's tied into some drainage issues by the old lumber yard and like at Broadway and Elm area. So that's one of the areas the guys are going to be looking at first. We're also going to be looking at Broadway and State Street also. That's another big problem area that we get a lot of complaints about. So anyway, overall, they're just going to start trying to connect the dots on this map. And I think that's really the biggest update that I have about the storm mapping for you guys. It looks pretty, doesn't it?
It's funny, will they be collecting new locations or just connecting the dots?
They're going to be connecting the dots. If there's new locations that have been missed, then we can collect it too. But
Just
I think
with a tablet GPS tablet.
yeah. So our guys have, you know, their phones, of course, that they use, and we have the collector app on the phones where they have their own logins. So we can see who's collected the data, when they collected it, and that kind of thing. So. And then if we do end up having any issues with them locating our lines, and I don't know all the technical terms for the tools that are used to help locate the lines, but I know whatever we have, they're able to go in and they can do straight lines underground. But if there's pipes that turn or then they're not able to do those. So that's where we would need Banning to come back in and help us out is, you know, on.
Yeah, you can put a snake on a utility locator and then trace it out. So.
So I've been learning as I go too. It's been interesting. But I think we're doing well on moving that project forward. Hey ladies. The next thing that I have on the list is the Broadway project. Let's see, where am I at? The Broadway and Water Street. So let me refresh your memory. I'm sure you guys remember this image from the last few times that we've met. This is a big project that we're working on to help relieve that drainage issue that we're having on Water Street. I'm sure it is flooding out there right now because it seems like anytime we get any rain, there's water on Water Street. So some of the project updates on this, we did have some manholes that Banning was having issues getting opened. So, you know, our guys went out and helped, assisted them on getting those manholes opened. There is an easement that we're working on getting with Steve Wills, kind of in this area. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but actually down here. We're going to be tying into this existing line, but we need to get an easement. So Cookie's already been over talking to Steve to see, you know, if he's okay with that. And I believe Banning has all the information or like the documentation drawn up so we can start moving forward on, you know, acquiring that easement. The other issue, I'm trying to think if there was any other issues with that. I think that's it. I think that's kind of where we're at right now, is getting that easement. And then the other image that is inside that folder for the Broadway Street is this drawing of a parking lot. And Jerry and I talked about this a little bit before the meeting started. He has a parcel that is kind of at the southwest side of this parking lot area. And we have some issues with driveways that we need to address with this parking lot. But this is all tied into that Water Street project. So we'll be constructing on the north side. You can see there's going to be new sidewalk, new curb, a new crosswalk that goes across Water Street. We have ADA parking that is on the north side of that parking lot, and then just a more structured parking lot in general throughout the rest of the site. Right now that parking lot is a gravel lot. It's over, you know, the landscaping and everything is just past its prime for sure. We're working on getting that cleaned up so we can have a nice town parking lot. And it makes sense to do this all at the same time as the Water Street project because we have some drainage that goes through the parking lot that can tie into that. So you can kind of see what's going on with that. And then there's also on-street parking that we're going to be putting in along Broadway Street. So that's really kind of the overall scope of the Broadway and Water Street project. You guys have any questions about those?
I'm good.
Do you guys want to move on to the sump pump ordinance update?
Yes.
Okay. On this one, and again, you guys may need to refresh me on this, but the last time I remember meeting about this, we talked about, we had talked about the board doing a little bit of research on some ideas that we might want to implement in town since we have the issue of those sump pumps that are draining out off of people's properties rather than keeping that stormwater on their own site. I do have Jeremy Van Erman here and Brady from Commonwealth that do have some information about this too, about, you know, an actual ordinance. But I think this is, you know, we talked about how it is a big issue and it's going to be a bigger issue, you know, this year and as we move forward. I'm sure you guys have all seen those areas around town that have the water pumping out into the streets, and we've had lots of complaints from residents. So it would be great if we could do something about it this year with an ordinance update and then maybe have some educational opportunities for residents. And, you know, I don't even know if we can find any funding opportunities for residents for like rain garden ideas, or I don't even know, you know, just other ways that people can keep their stormwater on their own site. So, Jeremy or Brady, do you guys have anything to add to that?
I'll start, and Brady, you can jump in. We've been looking at the ordinances from a compliance perspective and just updates, not a problem yet, but we're happy to wrap our arms around this and maybe incorporate some things we're looking at for you. as you're doing your mapping and as Banning is finishing, finding out what you do and don't have everywhere, it's going to, I think, highlight what you do and don't need as a service to those homeowners or property owners. You can only infiltrate so much groundwater back into the ground that they're pumping, probably from a crawl space or a basement. And you don't want to essentially create a cyclical effect where the water they're pumping into the yard comes right back into the basement or comes right back into the house. So you can do some fancy things with rain gardens. You can do some cool stuff. Policing it and having it in your ordinance to put the burden back on the homeowner is good. And there's a portion that you can do. And Brady, I'm catching him up on this a little bit. Forgive me, I didn't from last meeting. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been.
That obviously they've required South Madison utilities, to pull those out of the sewers. So they're pulling all the sump pumps out from pumping into the sanitary because we can't do that anymore. Therefore, it goes into the yard, and or if there's no catch basin or storm drain in the street, it goes wherever it can. And if there's not a good outlet for it, at some point it's going to be a little bit of a relationship between the city, the town, and the residents as to finding a home for that water that's getting pumped out. So you can police it, yes, but in the same breath, if there's no positive relief, there's going to be a little back and forth between the town and the resident. Because if you police it too hard, but then there's nowhere for it to go, I don't want it to come back on the town. But Brady, I think there's ordinance language we've seen on the sanitary side. But have you seen any ordinance language in communities you work with on how to direct?
Yeah,
this
I
kind
have
of-
not seen a whole lot of language, I guess, on the stormwater side necessarily. I think for most communities, the biggest battle is disconnecting from the sanitary sewer system because of the capacity issues it causes, and IDEM is now, has more of an emphasis on that in terms of policing capacity issues such as those that are caused by, sumps and what have you. But those are, good questions. We can do some digging as we finalize the ordinance that we've been working on, and maybe, reach out to some other folks and look at some others and see whether or not there would be any relief. But I think Jeremy hit the nail on the head that it's going to have to be an intensive, review or coordination with the homeowner, and that water's got to go somewhere. So typically with most communities, seems like Pendleton's come a long way or gone further than most in terms of eliminating those type of connections from the sanitary sewer system.
There are some technologies that in some communities there's a lot of research on this across the country in stormwater work. It's more than a rain barrel, but it's rainwater harvesting. You can also sump pump water, can be like groundwater harvesting and find a way to store it, but you're still talking about a tank in the yard or above ground tank. And that would open up a whole other conversation of how would you want to police and manage and permit any type of infiltration type structure that would go in a yard to percolate water back into the ground and or to potentially store it. It would be the similar situation with rain gardens or rain barrels, but a step further. Some communities do that. It depends on how aggressive or progressive the board.
Jerry or Kyle, do you guys have any thoughts on?
No, I mean, I guess, in general, that's a good idea, but there's always going to be cases where there's properties that it's impossible to, contain the stormwater without dumping it back into the basement. So there'll have to be some kind of, I don't know, in the ordinance to, I guess, deal with those cases, I would assume. Once we know where the actual storm infrastructure is, obviously if there's storm projects that could help, a whole neighborhood or a whole street, by installing, subsurface drains or something, that would be a thought too, I guess, for future projects. But we just got to see where all the storm infrastructure is, and then maybe see some example ordinances.
Some communities, when they do a curb cut and they allow the sump pump discharge pipe to be integrated into the curb. So when the sump pump kicks on, it literally pumps that water into the street, but there's positive relief. So the catch basin's a half a block away or somewhere. But in the winter, you still got a lot of ice sheeting from sump pumps that run through the winter.
Yeah.
So this is a hard one to get your arms around.
And that's what we've seen. We have quite a few pumps in the historic area that, we don't have a lot of drainage, and they're pumping in the street, and the street's deteriorating more quickly than it should because, the freeze and thaw.
Unfortunately, in that case, and Brady, correct me if I'm wrong, but the town would probably have to look at secondary drainage from catch basins that would be integral to the sidewalk and or close to the property line. It would essentially be almost like a sanitary lateral. You would allow a connection with some sort of backflow preventer or something that would allow them to pump their stormwater directly into a storm drain, like a 6-inch yard tile or a 6-inch.
Sure.
Yeah.
And those historically critical areas that are tight postage stamp lots, critical infrastructure, without providing them a positive outlet, that's going to be tough. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of an afterthought for the storm sewer in Pendleton because it was never really, I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't necessary, but it wasn't complete, or it wasn't a thorough system because a lot of it went into the sanitary sewer.
Right.
Yeah.
And, it combines small lots with, pumping out to the street where there's no catch basin, for a long ways. And it's just, I don't know that there's a good answer without spending a lot of money.
Right.
Yes, another possible way to look at this would be to look at from the minimum control measures from the MS4 program. We've got the public education and outreach. We also have the illicit discharge detection and elimination. So potentially, in order to maybe evaluate some of these, would be to look at that ordinance as to whether or not it's properly being enforced in terms of basement sumps that may have a discharge of a sink or a laundry, washing machine or something like that. And potentially that could be a way to sort of, in a roundabout way, look at, further evaluate some of these issues you're having on the basis of the quality that's coming out of it that maybe potentially should go to storm or should go to the sanitary system because of its discharge nature, because the fact of, detergents and other matters that shouldn't be discharged to a storm sewer. So that's kind of a roundabout way of dealing with it, but I think that could be something to look into that may not be, taking things too much further than they already are with existing town ordinances.
Let me talk about that a little bit, because I work at Fall Creek Regional Waste District, and there was just in the last couple of years a major overhaul of the sanitary sewer system in Pendleton, and the people from Fall Creek have been in a lot of basements in the town and made sure that where you have 2 or 3 points of discharge from a house, that they all are going into the sanitary sewer. Like, you have a kitchen sink that's separate from the rest of the plumbing or whatever. They found a lot of that, and they put more than one lateral into the main line. I'm not saying it's 100% perfect, but they did go in a lot of houses and make sure the connections were correct.
That's a lot of good work.
Great.
So I guess maybe for the next meeting, we'll look for some example ordinances. Is that what we're moving with this?
I think we could plan for that for the next one. Yeah, I think we'll have to be ordinance, but yet have some flexibility so we can deal like on a case-by-case basis with some of them, especially in the historic residential area, where our biggest challenge is going to be.
Has there been anything about Mr. Tooley's house on High Street?
No, not yet, unfortunately. He did email me a week ago or 2 weeks ago, asking for some updates, and I told him we were meeting tonight, but there has not been any movement on it. I think so Cookie is now our new storm water foreman, so he's been working more on these projects than anyone has in the past, which has been very helpful. However, he has been on light duty too, so and he had surgery recently. So, it's been hard with staff right now on keeping up with work and projects, just because I feel like we have really been short-staffed and have had some health issues too. So I am hoping now that we are getting back to the swing of things and that we'll be able to move forward on some projects that are much overdue to be worked on.
Yeah, it seems like there's that storm basin to the west of Mr. Tooley's discharge into the street, but it's higher than the street around it. So I don't know if that could be lowered, if there's money to lower that catch basin so water would run into it.
Mm-hmm.
If that, something like that could help that situation. But I mean, that Cookie would know more about that, I guess.
No, I do know that was something that we had talked about. So it will just be picking it back up and moving it forward once we are back and healthy and rolling again. And the hard thing is too, at this point in time, we don't have a stormwater budget necessarily. It's all coming out of the street department.
Right.
So I think once we have an income, coming in, that we can actually have a list of projects that need to be done and worked on. I know this is a simple one, but it is still going to cost the town something, and we have to figure out where that is coming from. When we're pulling from budgets, that it just makes it tricky right now, without having our storm water rate in place yet. So that's, I'm not scolding anyone here, but we do. That's a huge priority right now, is that we need to get that picked up and moving and start collecting a fee on that so we can actually do some of these projects. And again, I feel like we're just so behind on a lot of stormwater projects, they're just so long overdue. I mean, Lisa Floyd and Craig Campbell have been very, very patient with us trying to work through this flooding issue in their backyard, which is, ruining their backyard essentially. Every time it rains, they have quite a bit of water that stands there. So I don't want to say that Mr. Tooley's is not an important part. There's just other things that are in much worse condition at this point in time, that it's just going to take us all some time to work through some of these issues, since they have not been worked through to this point. So,
well, that rate ordinance that we looked at earlier, was it to the point where it's ready to be adopted?
No, I don't think so. I think that where we left off on it was we had to make some decisions on how we were charging schools and churches. I think the residential side of it, there was a rate that was proposed that was a reasonable rate. However, the churches and the schools and businesses, we had to make a decision as to how we were going to do that. I think the fees were coming back as like in the thousands, like $2,000 or more a month for a church, and
Right.
that's something that we feel okay with. How do we want to handle that? I think there was some choices on how we could charge them, and I think that's kind of where we left off on it. So I think once we get that piece decided, we'll be able to move forward and then take it to council, and then council can adopt whatever the rates are that this board is recommending. I think we're about 75% there, I guess.
We
Okay.
could potentially get something in place later this year, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that's what we should shoot for sure, by the end of the year, have something in place. And it should be not a difficult thing. I think there's plenty of reasons for us to pass a stormwater ordinance or a fee for it. I think, you know, people see it out in the streets all the time, you know, the need for it. You know, I know the last time we tried to up the trash rate, there was a lot of pushback and discussion about it. However, with the storm, I think some of that had to do with police officers too. There was a lot of other background stuff going on with that. So, you know, I think this will be a different story where it's not tied to anything politically or police related, which is a good thing for this board and for the town. It's a kind of a new standalone fee that doesn't have any history attached to it. And then there are projects that are very visible projects that are needed that I think it will be easier sell for council to adopt the fee. All right. I'm going to let Jeremy and Brady talk a little bit more. They were doing some work on our audit that had been done. They're just going to give us an update. I apologize, I don't have it on the agenda, but I'll let them take it from here.
Jeremy Vanderman, Commonwealth Engineers. Sorry for the unusual situation here, but thanks for letting us come. We were brought in essentially to help kind of the community get caught up to speed with IDEM and a couple things that they dinged the town on, which is the current MS4 permit compliance nature of the work that Jim Cook and the others are catching everybody up on. And Rachel's doing a great job with that as well. So Brady can speak technically a little more to what was caught and what we've done to help you and proposed with some updated ordinance language. We did get some general correspondence with the state and they've reviewed some things and it looks good. We do have some proposed ordinance updates that have kind of been triggered from that the town needs to take a look at. We've gotten that kind of to a point where the attorney's gonna have to review it and Rachel's gonna have to look at it. And obviously there's a contract tied to some of those things. So Jeff can speak to that and Rachel can too. But Brady, can you go ahead and jump in and share a little bit more technically what we've
Yeah, just to back up in terms of, logically, first of all, my name is Brady Dreyer. I'm the compliance manager for Commonwealth. So that being said, I used to work at IDEM, so I'm familiar with these stormwater things. In particular, I worked for the Office of Water Quality and the Combined Sewer Overflow Group. Commonwealth's perform MS4, consulting or compliance assistance services for some time. Chesterfield's one of our longtime clients. But on about August of 2019, the IDEM construction inspections team, that's the runoff, site runoff, post-construction folks came in to do an audit. And then the town basically received a form letter, if you will, with several things that needed to be updated. Those were things within the ordinance. The thing that's very unique about a lot of the communities in Madison County, including Pendleton, is that we're all a part of the Madison County Stormwater Quality Partnership. And therefore, we not only share resources with respect to public education and outreach, materials and hosting a website and things like that, but we're also very beneficial that small communities like Pendleton have the Soil and Water Conservation District, Brandy Frazier as they're currently. So basically the point in bringing that up is when it comes to construction and sites that are going to impact more than an acre, when plans come into town hall, SWCD basically does the reviews to make sure that the plans are consistent with, namely, the Indiana drainage handbook. In this case, however, Pendleton does have their own, you guys do have your own drainage standards. So a lot of the things that came up in that audit had to do with the construction, the site construction review process, which then not only kind of dovetailed into local policies and procedures, but also this ordinance that Jeremy and Rachel mentioned that we have updated. I'm going to see if I can share my screen.
Oh yeah, let me stop my screen sharing.
I'm more of a Teams guy, not much of a Zoomer, so you may have to help me along. Okay. Everybody see the ordinance or no?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. All right, yeah, let's try this one. How's that?
I still don't see it. What's it asking you?
There we go.
Okay.
Brady, you gotta click share. So at any rate, what we've done is basically Pendleton already had an ordinance. I want to say that was 2006. So we've taken a look at that ordinance that deals with construction and post-construction processes and what have you, and we integrated it into, you know, kind of some updated language and so forth. So,
Hey, Brady, we see your,
We see your boats.
yeah, we see
there
your.
we go. How's that?
There we go.
Okay, sorry.
We're all learning.
I'll
Good.
get the Zoom thing eventually. So anyway, we updated the ordinance basically, you know, consistent with today's standards and to meet IDEM compliance standards. The main things that we changed within this ordinance or really have updated has to do with a lot of different factors when it comes to enforcement procedures. That's one thing that IDEM was really stringent on. If we have a developer in town that is not minding what they put in from an erosion control standpoint, if we've got those folks that aren't abiding by the local rules and regulations, kind of what we need them to do. The other things that are more procedural with respect to how the plans are reviewed, and that had to take kind of a hard look at what the SWCD does versus what the town does. So we have basically kind of a process whereby a developer submits the town and then coordinates and submits to the Madison County's Soil and Water Conservation District for review as well. So those are just a couple of the updates, one of which that I see here, folks, is in the stormwater prevention plans. There are things that IDEM made us put in that are based on refueling areas or gas stations and also sensitive areas. And I'll touch on a couple of those things later as to why IDEM is kind of pointing in that direction and making us add those things. But what we have throughout this language, and I know we've got Jeff on the phone here, and ultimately it'll need, you know, legal review obviously before adoption, but from a procedural standpoint, what we had to make sure that this ordinance does is make sure that Pendleton is compliant with current IDEM regulations, which we're currently regulated under a permit by rule. That's why MS4 Rule 13, and we call erosion control Rule 5. So essentially what IDEM has to do is adopt general permits, which is basically a lengthy document that's, you know, 50 pages plus. And what we have to do in this ordinance or any ordinances moving forward and make sure that not only do we comply with IDEM's current permit by rule, but we also have to make sure we comply with this general permit that, you know, without COVID, we probably would have seen that come into effect by the end of the year. We may be pushed off just a little bit now. In fact, I think there was a board meeting in which that was going to be heard in May, but that of course has been postponed indefinitely. So within this ordinance, we've got a lot of language that talks about Group 5 as well as this forthcoming general permit. So this ordinance, mind you, we have coordinated with your reviewer with the IDEM and IDEM's Office of Water Quality. He has basically blessed the contents of this. It meets the standards and meets the deficiencies that were noted in the town's inspection last year, audit last year, so we're good to go there. The other thing that'll need to come up for formal adoption and signing at some point is what's called a memorandum of understanding, and that is with the Madison County Stormwater Conservancy District, and that is so that the town can continue this relationship whereby when plans come in that are going to impact, greater than an acre, that the SWCD performs plan reviews on those. So that gives you kind of an update, I guess, as far as what our work does. We've got a couple things that have been highlighted that are up for discussion at a later date, but I think I've kind of hit the highlights on the process and sort of what brought this ordinance back up to IDEM's, I guess, viewpoint, so that we would meet their requirements and standards.
That was a mouthful, but Brady did a better job of getting you a history and bringing you to where we are today. So.
So this, I guess, to one of the points that Rachel brought up, and the group today is spoke about, implementing the rate ordinance that I think goes back to 2014, and we've certainly got not only our infrastructure that we've discussed today, but there are also these, requirements, compliance requirements as well that takes the town's resources to implement. So that's certainly something to consider. And I know with any new fee, however it's put in place, is always going to have folks, questioning that, and rightfully so. But this not only is from a capital improvements or an infrastructure standpoint, but there is certainly the compliance end of it as well, particularly communities like Chesterfield and Pendleton and others that are really small communities.
And then Brady, next steps on this. I think we have a contract that we're getting reviewed by Jeff, and once we get that officially signed, will we get a copy of this in-house then that we can review and have Jeff review this as well?
Absolutely.
And the Stormwater Board. And then, we end up taking it to council.
About potentially bringing this about the same time you do your rate ordinance, so they could do all the updates in one shot.
Mm-hmm.
Timing will tell. You guys will know better than us if that sounds like.
Okay.
But yeah, we may have even sent a copy.
Okay. You may have.
That's okay.
My inbox has been a little overwhelming.
That's all right. Jeff,
and working remotely under these conditions, even more so, right?
Well, good. Great.
Sure.
Questions on this one? On this piece? Mm-hmm. No questions?
I don't have any questions. I file Rule 5s all the time, so I'm familiar.
No, it's really, I think, going to be a good year for this board. I think there's a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit projects that we can get done quickly, that by the end of the year we'll have a good, we'll have a lot of work to show. Even though it's been kind of slow the first 6 months of this year, I think the last 6 months we'll be able to get a lot of work done and have some good, much needed projects done and moving forward.
Good.
All right. I don't have anything else unless you guys have anything else you'd like to talk about.
I don't have anything.
Okay.
I don't either. I guess that we talked about a drainage problem out on the west side of town. I'm assuming that resolved itself.
So we have two drainage problems on the west side of town. One of them, and again, I'm not completely remembering what the timing was on these. So
Was it Fox Run?
Fox Run had a drainage issue. The guys were able to go out and they found there was a chunk of concrete that had come loose, and so they were able to remove that, and that relieved the problem. So we have not had any more calls from Fox Run. They were really happy that we worked with them and got the problem solved. So that was it took a little bit of time, but it was an easy fix, thankfully. There's also a sinkhole in a yard that is getting looked at, and I believe the guys are working on, I needed to get a better update before I talked about it, but I think they're working on getting it fixed, so that homeowner should be happy as well. We've been trying to locate the as-built drawings for any of the subdivisions that we've taken in over the last few annexations, but we've not been able to find those. So something that Kayla is feeling very strongly about is making sure that whenever we do any future annexations of subdivisions is that we get those as-built drawings as part of the annexation process. Just so when we have issues like this, we know very clearly who is responsible for what. When we were looking at the annexation information, you know, that subdivision in particular was, at the time of annexation, it doesn't speak to any stormwater infrastructure and whose responsibility it is for the stormwater infrastructure. So then but it is very clear about the roads and electric and water. So that was kind of a tough one for us to determine, you know, how to fix that situation. We also had an issue. There was a property out by 600, also on the west side of town, where the new planned unit development, there is a proposal, primary plat that's been filed with the Plan Commission on a particular property out there. And there's a homeowner that is just north of that property that was having some drainage issues. And what we determined was that the property owner had done some site grading that had altered kind of the drainage that was going on out there. And we've, you know, really stepped back from that. It's a property owner issue, not necessarily a town drainage issue. So we've been trying to be mindful of, you know, not overstepping our boundaries or taking responsibility for things that are truly private property owner issues.
So like, just quick question. So like on these new subdivisions that are going in, are they going to be required to submit like AutoCAD or shape files that we can import into that stormwater map?
That's what we need to do. Our ordinance is not currently written like that, but the update that we're doing is going to include that so that we are getting those things in. So we will likely be working like with Westport to get those drawings, and they've been really great to work with. And I think we can work with Arbor to get the ones for Huntsinger as well. So we can at least have those two done. The fall subdivision that's going in, I think we've probably missed the boat on that one to get those drawings, but the other two subdivisions, I think we'll be able to get them, and then we're gonna make sure we get that stuff written into our.
Yeah, if we could on that one, you could at least request the design drawings, not necessarily as-built, and that would be, they would have those.
Yeah, we talked about that the last meeting. That, you know, they said they could help us, you know, get everything written appropriately so that we get all the information that we need, and it gets, you know, sent over to us exactly how we need to just plop it into place.
Well, yeah, you need to say you can't get a building permit until you submit as-built, and then that will get the information. So.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
All righty. I didn't have anything else. Is there anything else on the agenda?
Nope, that's what we got.
All right. Jerry, any other input?
Nope.
Is there any members of the public on here that have comments?
I did see that we had one person that had called in. You are allowed to talk right now, caller, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to speak about.
It's just me, Tracy.
Oh, hey, Tracy.
No comment.
No comments. That's great. All right. We had no public comment. Tracy, who usually does our minutes. So that makes it easy.
All right. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.